Welcome back to Luminous Star Fables. Today we're stepping into another chapter of deep diving, a space where clarity, courage, and curiosity meet as we examine stories shaping our world and the shadows that refuse to stay hidden. Over the past few days, the names Donald J. Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell have surged across Google Trends, social media feeds, and mainstream headlines, not because the past has changed, but because new questions are rising to the surface. To understand why this story is trending again, we explore why Donald J. Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell are trending across Google and social media. I'll walk through the timeline of events, revealing more pressure from the Department of Justice to resurface statements and viral speculation by using verified reporting and trauma-informed analysis. I've observed that some people may find these recent developments concerning and unsettling, and that reaction is completely understandable. Many are looking more closely at what's unfolding because long-buried issues appear to be rising to the surface, issues that may have been hidden for far too long. As more people seem to seek peace, whether it's financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, and social, it can feel as though these unresolved problems are resisting change on their way out. While some believe conflict must erupt before peace can emerge, others, especially those who have lived through trauma, may long for healthier, more constructive ways to resolve long-standing tensions. No matter where you stand, it's clear that many people are paying attention to how these matters are being addressed. And as your own story continues to unfold, it's important to remember that your existence carries purpose. Your healing journey is valid, and you can choose to keep thriving forward with clarity, compassion, and meaning. Now, I want to discuss phase one, the renewed pressure on the Department of Justice. The first wave of attention began when a Manhattan federal judge ordered the Trump Justice Department to respond to lawmakers demanding a special master to oversee the release of Epstein-related documents. Lawmakers argued the DOJ was not complying with the Epstein Transparency Act, prompting the judge to request a formal explanation. At the same time, additional reporting revealed that the DOJ still has more than 2 million documents under review, far beyond the original deadline. This intensified public scrutiny and raised questions about transparency and accountability. A legal analyst summarized the public sentiment. Justice is not only about outcomes, it's about the integrity of the process. Phase two began when statements from Ghislaine Maxwell resurfaced unexpectedly. Shortly after the Department of Justice filings, older statements attributed to Ghislaine Maxwell resurfaced online. Some were confirmed through court documents, others circulated through commentary channels and were debated for accuracy. This reignited long-standing questions about influence, power, and the systems that allowed exploitation to persist. A well-known transparency advocate on X captured the mood. When powerful people are involved, transparency becomes a public responsibility, not a private courtesy. Surmounting issues and concerns seem to come to the surface as phase three brings viral claims and public speculation. As these developments unfolded, social media platforms, especially TikTok, X, and YouTube, became flooded with commentary. Some creators amplified legitimate reporting, others blended fact with speculation. CBS News reported that the delayed release has triggered calls for an internal watchdog review, adding another layer of public concern. A trauma-informed psychological educator offered this grounding reminder. For survivors, stories involving secrecy, manipulation, and power imbalances can echo personal experiences. It's important to stay grounded and remember that public cases do not define your personal healing. Now, I'll share with you some of the trauma-informed insights for narcissistic abuse survivors that I found according to my research. According to mental health practitioners and trauma therapists, here are key insights survivors can take from this topic. These are general principles used in trauma recovery. Understanding power imbalances. High-profile cases often highlight how power can be used to manipulate, silence, or control. Recognizing patterns of secrecy and minimization. Survivors often live through confusion, denial, and distortion. Validating the need for transparency. Asking questions is healthy, not confrontational. Learning emotional boundaries. Heavy news cycles can overwhelm the nervous system. Understanding trauma echoes. Public stories can activate old wounds. Reaffirming the importance of support. Healing is not meant to be done alone. These insights are not about diagnosing anyone involved in this case. They are about helping survivors understand their own healing, their own patterns, and their own needs. From my own lived experience, I've learned that healing is not a contest, it's a commitment. A custom-made support base can provide survivors with grounding tools that reflect emotional safety. The public dynamics surrounding the Epstein case offer a powerful and macro-level mirror of the psychological themes survivors navigate internally. The demand for transparency, the questioning of power, and the struggle against secrecy reflect the same emotional architecture that trauma survivors confront in their personal healing. Just as survivors work to reclaim their narrative, the public is demanding clarity from institutions that once withheld information. Just as survivors challenge minimization and gaslighting, the public is challenging delays, redactions, and confusion. Just as survivors seek validation, the public is insisting on accountability. These parallels matter because they remind us that trauma is not only personal, it is systemic. And when systems fail to provide clarity, they can unintentionally echo the same dynamics that once harmed survivors. For aspiring clinicians, advocates, and survivors themselves, this case highlights essential truths. Power imbalances must be named before they can be dismantled. Secrecy and minimization create psychological harm, whether in a home or an institution. Transparency is a form of justice. Trauma echoes are real and they deserve compassion. Emotional pacing is not avoidance, it is self-protection. Healing is strengthened through community, not isolation. Understanding these connections deepens our empathy and strengthens our commitment to trauma-informed care. As this story continues to evolve, remember, you are allowed to stay informed without sacrificing your peace. You are allowed to seek truth without reopening old wounds. And you are allowed to walk away when the noise becomes too loud. Thank you for tuning in. Stay informed, stay resilient, stay luminous.
So, the Jeffrey Epstein files are all over the news again. But the conversation this time isn't really about what's in the files. It's about the fact that we still haven't seen most of them. We're talking delays, missed deadlines, and a whole lot of frustration. So what's really going on? Well, we're going to break it all down.
Okay, so why the sudden uproar? Why now? It really boils down to one simple thing. A legally required deadline to release a ton of documents was just flat out missed. And that one event has kicked off this huge chain reaction that's got everyone talking. Let's get into it.
To really get the full picture, we're going to walk through 5 key pieces of this puzzle. First, we'll tackle the sheer logistical nightmare of the document logjam. Then, we'll look at who's stepping in to demand some accountability. After that, we have to touch on the political storm this has brewed up and how that creates a dangerous information vacuum. And finally, we'll focus on the most important part, the real human cost at the heart of it all.
All right, first up, let's talk about the core problem here. This isn't just about a few misplaced files. We're talking about a literal mountain of data and a deadline that has come and gone.
You see, this whole thing was set into motion by Congress. They passed something called the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and it wasn't a suggestion. It was a federal law with a very specific hard deadline for the Department of Justice to release all its records on the matter.
And here's the kicker. That deadline? It was missed. That one fact is the spark that lit this entire fire. The failure to comply has basically thrown the doors wide open for all the public pressure and intense scrutiny we're seeing right now.
Now, if you want to understand why they missed the deadline, you have to get your head around the insane scale of this task. The Department of Justice says it's identified over 2 million documents that could be related. 2 million. Every single one of those has to be found, reviewed, and processed. It is a truly colossal job. And look, they are throwing some serious resources at this. Court filings show they've got around 400 DOJ lawyers and FBI analysts working on this review. Many of these people are experts in handling exactly this kind of sensitive material involving victims.
But even with 400 people on it, the challenge is just staggering. By the time the December deadline rolled around, how much progress had they made? Government lawyers reported that only 1% of the files had been reviewed and released. 1%. That's the number that really put this whole delay into perspective for everybody. So, when a government agency misses a deadline this publicly on a case this sensitive, people are going to start demanding answers. Which brings us to our next question. Who exactly is stepping up to hold them accountable? Well, the failure to release these documents has brought together a really broad and, frankly, surprising group of people. They're all asking the same basic questions. What is going on here? And can we actually trust this process?
A key player you're going to hear about is the Office of Inspector General, or the OIG. The easiest way to think of them is like internal affairs for the Department of Justice. They are an independent group whose entire job is to look into failures or potential misconduct inside the department. And now, lots of people are asking them to step in and investigate this delay.
And the calls for some kind of outside accountability are coming from everywhere. You've got Epstein survivors and their lawyers demanding a review. You have ethics watch groups filing formal complaints. A group of senators from both parties is calling for a neutral assessment. Some lawmakers are even going to a federal court, asking a judge to appoint what's called a special master, basically an independent outsider to oversee the whole thing. And of course, this inevitably leads us to the next very complicated layer. Because of all the powerful and famous names connected to Epstein, this entire process has been sucked into a political vortex, which makes a simple push for transparency, well,
anything but simple.
This delay has created a vacuum, and that vacuum is being filled with a ton of political debate. We've seen past comments and associations involving former President Trump resurface and get scrutinized. At the same time, you have watchdog groups filing complaints, worried that the DOJ might be, in their words, selectively releasing files for partisan purposes. It's created a lot of questions about the integrity of the whole process.
And this quote from a legal analyst really gets to the heart of what's at stake here for so many people. It doesn't matter what your politics are. The big issue is public trust. The fear is that if the process itself looks biased or flawed, then whatever the outcome is, it just loses all credibility.
So when you have that lack of information and that lack of trust, it creates the absolute perfect breeding ground for rumors, speculation, and conspiracy theories. And that brings us to the information vacuum.
And this vacuum isn't just appearing out of thin air. There are specific things fueling it. I mean, think about this. In one document dump, there were over 500 pages that were completely blacked out, just solid redactions. The files that do get released are often just thrown out there with no context. The DOJ even released a bunch of unvetted public tips, including a forged letter they had to take back. And to cap it all off, the very law that started all this has no penalties for not complying.
This comment from social media really captures the mood out there perfectly. There's this strong feeling that when the people involved are this powerful, transparency isn't just a courtesy, it's a fundamental public responsibility.
Finally, and honestly most importantly, let's talk about the part of this story that gets lost in all the legal debates and the political fighting, and that is the human cost. What does all this delay and confusion mean for the survivors?
One psychological analyst who specializes in this kind of trauma explained it so well. For anyone who has survived abuse, watching a public story like this unfold, a story filled with secrecy, delays, and questions about power, can be incredibly re-traumatizing, because it often echoes the exact dynamics of their own painful experiences.
Trauma-informed therapists often point to constructive ways of looking at these situations. Things like understanding power imbalances, seeing the patterns of secrecy for what they are, validating why transparency is so necessary, and just reaffirming how crucial support systems are. These are all key ideas that this public story really brings to the surface.
Which brings us to our final question. You know, there's that old saying, justice delayed is justice denied. As we all watch this saga unfold with its missed deadlines and its information vacuums, it really forces us all to ask, when a process is this slow and this unclear, what really gets lost in the silence?